So most people think that buying property or getting houses is a good investment, and it probably actually isn't most of the time or much of the time. Now, you got to listen to me with this. You got to sort of pay attention. I'm a business professor, and uh, I'm going to try to walk you through this. Now, what we want to look at is what is the best return for the risk that we're actually bearing, right? That's the general idea behind a lot of investment. You kind of have a basic idea that you probably have heard this before, right? Doing risky things will actually lead to better investment and more return. And it's very difficult, right, to quantify, what that might be. It's very difficult for all of us. And what we end up doing, right? So the best assets that we know of, the best return that we know of, on average for the risk that you bear, right? There's all sorts of research on this now. I would say it's probably, in terms of finance, it's like basically a fact at this moment. Um, the best assets we could buy often are the best companies in the world. Why is that? Is because um, they have in the best people in the world with the best assets that they are in control of, managed by the best people that we know of, right? So if you put that all together, right, like labor, and so from economists speak, they would talk about labor, they would talk about capital and knowledge. You put those all together at the sort of best of the best, we're going to get the best returns. Like that's kind of the basic idea behind that. And so where do you get the best of the best? Well, what you would do is take a smattering um, of all of the best companies around the world, and then you'd aggregate them all together and you'd put them together in some sort of package, right? So what does that look like typically? Well, the best one, the sort of default that most investors that are knowledgeable go to is the S&P 500. Now, why is it the Standard and Poor 500? It's kind of more historical, why it's 500. There's the Russell, I think 3000, which is the top 3000. Doesn't really matter, but they're just picking an arbitrary number of the best companies that we know of that are weighted in the stock market. Now, there's sort of discussion about whether you should do an average weighting. There's all kinds of nuances, a little bit of nuance to this, but basically you're just taking a smattering of the best companies in the world. And if you take that smattering, right, you pick 500 or whatever, and typically you want to do, um, you typically don't want to sort of pick it yourself because it's very difficult to pick. We have a lot of biases and we make a lot of mistakes, so it's very difficult to actually do that. So that's why I end up just doing what are called indexes, or just investing very broadly. I've never invested in a single company other than the Reciprocity Project, and it's been a boondoggle for me. It's been a horrible investment. If I look at the investment returns compared to the S&P 500 index funds, um, absolutely horrible, right? Like it has not panned out in any sort of way in terms of benefiting. But here's the thing, why do I do it? It's because I get all sorts of joy and all that stuff out of it. It's a far different motivation. I'm not saving. I'm not doing it to get rich. Although, it'd be nice, but it's not gonna, it's unlikely to happen at this stage. So, with the 500, right? We've got the sort of best of the best company, or best, the best companies with the best labor, the best access to resources, best opportunities, all the best. We've invested in them. Now, we can also invest and pick and choose single things that we would like to invest in, right? It's typically what people end up investing in, besides those kind of blanket investments like index funds and mutual funds that are really diversified. They typically invest in property. Property is houses, dirt, right? Like just a hunk of ground. and then they put some money in it, they buy it, and they think it's actually going to pan out. Now, why is this typically a worse investment? Well, it logically kind of makes sense if you think of it in terms of, labor, capital, knowledge, um, access to opportunities and resources. Now, when you're investing in your house or you're investing in property, you're only investing in one of those, right? You're only investing in location and property of sort of one element, which is fine, right? Like we own our own house. We sort of purchase our own house and we live in it, which is fine for your own enjoyment. But as an investment, sort of looking around and putting money broadly, it really doesn't make that much sense because you're missing out on some of the most important um, revenue generation or profit sort of centers that we know of, right? So knowledge, really important. Learning's really important. Uh, access to opportunities, access to the right individuals, all of these things you're not really capturing with by investing property. Now, the other thing that's foolhardy, I've already sort of made a comment about it, is you are picking one single asset and one opportunity rather than spreading your money out across the world, across many different smart people that can pick and choose and do things for you, make choices for you, which is exactly what an index fund is, or get access to different knowledge and those kind of things. Whereas you typically, you're going to buy property. Almost everybody will do this. I think it would be strange if you didn't, but you're going to buy property in your tiny little area. And yes, you're going to have sort of nuanced knowledge of your local area, which is fantastic. But there's much knowledge that you might be missing out of in the broader sense and not capturing it, right? So what am I saying here? So you're going to you're going to believe that you're going to buy property in your local community, right? So for me, it's my little tiny town in Florida. I'm going to buy a piece of property there, but I'm not going to think about buying a piece of property in Tokyo because Tokyo is probably going to net me a better return. Now, if you get access to all of the best infrastructure, knowledge companies, yeah, all this kind of stuff, learning, those people are typically going to be able to invest in places like Tokyo and do a much better job of that. Right now, if you look at, if you just look at sort of the face value, the tipping point and why we actually own our own home instead of renting it, it sort of locks in the value at one point and what it actually is versus, just gradual inflation. Now, the other thing it does gives you some slight tax benefits. Now, all of that disappears when you start buying more and more property and becomes a little bit more complicated. And there is a lot of management that happens, right? And I'm okay to pay for managing resources on my behalf, as long as it's doing it well, they're doing a great job, and I'm somewhat satisfied in any given moment. Now, the problem becomes is when you are investing in, um, like when you start investing in your own properties, you're going to want, there's all these behavioral biases that we have, individual biases that make us want to do things ourselves, make us believe that we're really, really smart ourselves and smarter than everybody else. And all of, and that's natural stuff, right? Like, I think that is totally normal. I do that. Um, and by the way, why I'm actually talking about is because I think I know something, which is kind of ironic. Um, but if you logically think these things through, you're almost always going to be better to, invest broadly, unless it's your own home. When it's your own home, I encourage you should be buying your own home and working through paying off that mortgage. That's a good investment. But if you are buying it as, um, as an investment and buying, multiple properties, commercial properties and things like that, just be well aware it's going to be a giant pain. And for the amount of work and hassle, it likely will not work out in your favor. Now, there's caveats here, and this is why you hear about it. Every once in a while, people get lucky. They just get lucky, and things will work out in their favor. Or they'll become, very, very wealthy by owning property. And so we're going to see that. Now, the other thing that often we forget about is that, the property is physical assets. And we could see it, right? Whereas people that don't invest in physical assets, they don't see it nearly as much. It's not as clear. You don't see it nearly as much. You have a biased opinion or biased belief on what generates wealth. We all sort of do that because we look at somebody and we have a great big house. They have a great big house, and you think like, oh, they're very wealthy. That's difficult to actually say compared to people that invest in S&P 500 index funds and things that are really invisible, which is actually where most wealth is accumulated today. So good luck with it all. Hopefully this helps you sort of think things out. Take care. Have a wonderful day.